incunabula. You should know that word. That's an important word. The incunabula is Latin for infancy, and it was the first 50 years of the printing press. That's from 1450 to 1500. At this time, the church still holds the monopoly on printing. I mean, they held the monopoly on manuscripts, and now they hold the monopoly on printing. They are very powerful and worried to let that technology in the hands of anyone outside of the authority of the church, right? They don't want to be published. Copyright is held by publishers, not writers. And why is it so? Why is it so threatening to the Catholic Church? And that's because books are powerful. Graphic design, visual communication is powerful. And books can change the way people think. And books can do things like start revolutions. And that's what we see in this chapter, which is super exciting. Marshall McLuhan describes the effect of the printing press as one that created a global village. Before the arrival of Gutenberg, books were like paintings. They were unique artifacts that were precious and scarce. And after 50 years of the printing press, just during the incunabula, it's estimated that as many books were printed with the press that had been written by hand during the whole previous millennium. So it is so powerful, in this point in time. It was estimated at 27,000 to 30,000 different editions, producing a total of 15 to 20 million books. And so that's pretty astonishing for that time. The prompt is to consider and understand, with the increasingly visible and powerful impact of print on all cultural areas, playing an equally expanded role for graphic design in shaping and circulating knowledge. How did print, the Gutenberg Bible, transform society? How did it change the labor of the discipline? How did the new technologies, including Gutenberg's type, affect the formal elements of book design? Affecting the formal elements is part of that pop quiz on why it's considered a work of art and wonder of technology, right? It's because of what it looks like, how it looks so uniform and mechanical compared to a handmade, illuminated manuscript. But I just want to remind you that the Chinese already had paper and printing at this time, and both Chinese and Korean cultures already had movable type, and woodcut printing was already known and understood on how to use. So the question is, what did Gutenberg make, right? Because these technologies already existed, and he's like a quintessential example that innovation is often just taking things that already exist and twisting them into a new form. And my example is like computers existed and telephones existed, and Apple computer put them together and we have a smartphone. And the very first smartphones, they were really just like really simple phones with a little computer in them. And now they're like a whole field in themselves, right? They have their own inherent properties, the media made for them, and accelerometers and GPS, and like it's really coming to like what they are. But in the beginning, it was much more rudimentary, and it was just combining two technologies that already existed into one. So what's really important to know about is his type mold that shows the technology that he first used in the 15th century, and he's considered the first European to use movable type. And this is the invention of the process for mass-producing movable type. That's one of the most important things about Gutenberg. He would hand-carve the letters onto steel punches. So we have a new job in the field called the punch cutter. And the punch cutter is a highly skilled job, right? Carving these tiny little letters, which I showed you a video for. Highly skilled. Most of us today do not have the skills to carve those tiny little letters. They would then strike the punch into softer metal that was made of copper, and then a matrix would be made into which an even softer metal with a lower melting point would be cast. Every letter had to be cast by hand, trimmed of its mold residue, filled and examined for flaws before it could be used. It was time-consuming and a detail-oriented, skillful process. So this is another example from the book that shows you the punch, the matrix, the type mold, and with the matrix removed and turned in its orientation. So what's really important is that he had what is also important is that he had a background in metalsmithing, and he knew about the melting temperatures of metals. So he was able to create this new combination of 80% lead, 5% tin, and 50% antimony, so that it had a relatively low temperature for faster and more economical casting. It cast well, and it created a durable type. So that is, really the thing that he innovated. And then he put together a system from technologies that were already in use. I mean, they became, better over time. So, paper made its way from China to Europe, and there were already wine, cheese, and olive presses in use, so he adapted that to fit his paper and his plate, and he created this Johannes Gutenberg Bible in Germany in 1450 to 55, and it is, considered a treasure. It's his major work. It's acclaimed for its aesthetic, beauty, and technical quality. It's the first typographic book in Europe. It's 11 by 16 inches, 1,282 pages in 2 volumes. What does that tell you about it? Thick and big and heavy, and also used for ceremonial purposes. It's a performative text. Made for display rather than private study, and illuminated added the graphic details, including the hand-drawn capitals after printing. There was another new position in the labor of visual communication, and that was the rubricator, who were specialized scribes that received the text from the manuscript's original scribe and supplemented with additional text in red ink for emphasis. So the rubricator added the red text afterwards by hand. But why it's considered, a wonder of technology and a work of art is because of the visual order created by mechanization. It appears to look like a legal document. There's considered space between the lines of text, the alignment of the lines of text at the margins, and the position of the block of text on the page. They all look tidier and more uniform than they did on the manuscript page. Print gradually made reading aloud pointless and accelerated the act of reading until the reader could feel in the hands of the author. He's credited with changing the way Europeans read and ultimately the way they thought. And another important thing just about the beauty of his design is that he designed over 300 letters just so that he could do that beautiful justified type, so that it's aligned both left and right beautifully without what we call rivers and valleys when text is poorly justified, which you commonly see in newspapers today because they are printed so quickly. So he cast close to 300 different letters just so that he could make that beautiful justification. So there's also modularity here as it applies to the labor industry, things I already said. But like Marshall McLuhan says, the invention of typography confirmed and extended the new visual stress of applied knowledge, providing the first uniformly repeatable commodity, the first assembly line, right? Pre-industrial revolution. Suddenly, instead of one scribe and illustrator working together to create an entire book, it's broken up into segments where all they're doing is setting the type. Someone else is taking the type and putting it back. The compositor is just putting it back in its cases. There's someone else who's cutting the punches, right? So it's a very structured, individualized, segmented division of labor. And it represents the division from the medieval to the modern time. And so here's an example of, just what a press room would look like. And you can see that everyone's working together, typesetters, proofers, and press operators, pulling prints from a wooden press all together, but they have very distinct individual jobs. And, in some ways, that's a lot less creative and interesting, right? It's all you're doing is pulling the press, or all you're doing is setting the type. It's a lot less varied. And so this is, the blueprint for industrialization. But this is the important point, and I do have the slide. It's that, when you put something out there in the world, it begins to have a life of its own. So even as hard as the Catholic Church tried to maintain control of this powerful form and technology of the printing press, they couldn't keep control of it, right? People have power too. And so clandestinely, Martin Luther had a printer print his 95 Theses in which he criticizes the Catholic Church and points out all of its hypocrisies, and he begins the Protestant Reformation through the viral media that he was able to create with the printing press, because of all the advantages of printed material, that it's the same print after print after print. It's the exact same information. It is not mediated through the hands of a monk. So that's like super exciting. And I also mentioned William Tyndale at this time because he died for printing the Bible in English because the Catholic Church really wanted to maintain its power, and perfectly timed. That's the end of that chapter. Okay? All right. So then we go into chapter 5. We see the rise of the popular press fosters partisan interest in political activity, demonstrating the influence of media networks. That is really interesting, right? Because we start to see how print can have this light in people's minds, and people can use that information to connect with each other and change their world. Super powerful. But in terms of typography, which is super important for you to know about, we see old style, transitional, and modern. And that is kind of dry. That's a little hard, very specific and detailed. Personally, I think it's a little boring, right? I think the political part of what it does is super interesting as it allows people to share information. But the details of it you need to know about because they're your field. So in this case, you have 4 artifacts to know about. To consider and understand how did early newspapers, the first printed diurnal, contribute to A, building communities connected by shared interests, B, political activity, C, creation of a public sphere, and why did freedom of the press matter? And I feel like I stress that a lot during lecture. But then, in terms of knowing more about your field, how did innovation, not just how your field operates, but that's so important, what it means that we do this. But then also, how do we do it? And that's innovations in type design, when we go from old style to transitional to modern Roman, to enhance the experience of readers and support the goals mentioned above. How do the new forms of type support Beatrice's word concept of a crystal gall? So the first example is the first printed diurnal, which is a daily news announcement. The typographic strategies here look, kind of rudimentary. It looks like the title page of a book. So newspapers come out of what already exists. Newspapers come from book artifacts. The type is descending in point size, but not for any real obvious reason. It's more like there's a innuendo of the Trajan column, but not really needed because the person's just holding it here. So it's kind of like they're getting at visual hierarchy, but not with the intentions that we think of today as visual hierarchy. Okay, and so we talked about Jürgen Habermas's book, The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere, where he talks about this really important concept that when people are reading the same things and they're discussing them, they create a public sphere, which is a space of critical discussion open to all, where private people came together to form a public whose public reason would work as a check on power. And then I also pointed out Nancy Fraser, who expands on Habermas's ideas, saying marginalized groups are excluded from the universal public sphere, because the public sphere that was happening was really the public sphere of affluent men at the time, people who had the time to hang out in coffee shops and read the newspaper. So she's pointing out that it's impossible to claim that one group would in fact be inclusive. Marginalized groups form their own public spheres, a subaltern, counter-public, and I think that is really important. So the first example for looking at old style, transitional, and modern type comes from Aldous Manutius during the Renaissance. I didn't point it out when we were in chapter 4 because I held on to it until we talked about chapter 5. So this artifact is in chapter 4, and this becomes the prototype for 2 centuries of European graphic design. This is called old style, and it was made because Manutius studied the typefaces from the ancient Greece and Rome, and he creates this new typeface. So it's called Venetian Old Style, and it's That's the name of these kind of typefaces that were developed at this time in Venice. The ascender height exceeds the capital letter height. There's a diagonal stress in the text. It also has a small X height. Not that you need to know this, you might want to know it. It has short bracketed serifs with cut faces. And it's very beautiful. It has this old look to it. And it survives today as the typeface symbol. You can use it in Illustrator and make something that looks beautiful and has the sort of reverence of the Renaissance. And then King Louis XIV commissioned an exclusive typeface for the Royal Printing House, and this is called the Imprimerie Royale. And it signifies a very important change, that type is no longer based on hand script. So I didn't point out when we looked at Gutenberg's Bible that typeface is black letter. And it's black letter because that was what the hand script in Germany looked like at that time. And so now we start getting away from the hand lettering, and we go toward mechanical, engineer-based, mathematical letter form. So they're very rational. It's a rational approach, and we're in the time of the Enlightenment, and that's a very rational time. The calligrapher is replaced by the engineer. This has inherent properties of type that's designed with metal. There's a grid of 64 main squares that are subdivided to 2,034 smaller squares, circle and parallel lines. This is the first transitional typeface. And it's reserved for the printing of the royal house. So again, it's an example of encoding the image of the state as the centralized authority through the use of type. And Baskerville is also in this category of transitional typeface. It is important to know Baskerville as well, that this is transitional. You can see an increased ratio of thick to thin. It's the peak of transitional style. And it survives today as Baskerville and also as Mrs. Eves, who was Baskerville's wife. And the last example is the Donut. And this is the fully modern version or type style. And it totally exemplifies the vision and spirit of the machine age. It's considered modern. It's narrower and more condensed, taller and more geometric, hairline, non-bracketed serif. It's the typographic expression of neoclassicism. And it has qualities that are considered to be the following: uniformity of design, sharpness and ease, good taste and charm. And a way to understand why this is important is it's so technical and very detail oriented, but it's really important because typeface is communicated at so many levels. And Beatrice Ward wrote this important essay called The Crystal Goblet, and also she wrote under a man's name, which I forgot to tell you when we talked about this chapter, because women were so unwelcome. And then she got a job interview at Monotype, I think, and she arrived to the interview and they thought she would be a man, and then she continued to work then as a woman. But I just think that's super interesting. So she says type well used is invisible as type. This is the perfect talking voice, is the unnoticed vehicle for the transmission of words, ideas. Printing should be invisible. So the goal was to create type that people didn't really pay attention to, and the author could just transmit their ideas to the reader. So to summarize, old style type has a diagonal stress, slanted serif, and thick to thin contrast. Transitional type has an increased X height and contrast, vertical stress, and horizontal serif. And modern is more geometric with more contrast. And so there's just another quote from Beatrice Ward, but it's the same idea, that type should be invisible. And there's your slide, the prompt. Okay, so the next two chapters I'm going to go through quickly because they're the most recent ones, and I think that we're heading into modern times and they're more easy to understand. So Industrial Revolution, of course, industry is very important. So there's a lot of technological innovation. And in terms of the labor of design, very important that factory owners replace landowners as the most powerful force. Printers are trained in apprenticeship and printing is considered a trade, not an art. Printing becomes a working class occupation. So it shifts dramatically over time from the high regard that scribes had